Surviving widowhood, battling breast cancer twice, and raising a black boy into a successful man gave me skin thicker than oak. Yet, every ounce of that strength vanished into thin air the afternoon my stiff, arthritic thumb failed to press the red end call button fast enough on my phone. My name is Blair Parker. For 35 years, I walked the halls of Chicago's Mercy Hospital as a pediatric nurse, while my late husband, Apollo, built a commercial plumbing business from the ground up. We were children of the Great Migration, our parents having come up from Mississippi with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a fierce determination. Apollo and I took that determination and built an empire. It wasn't flashy, no yachts or private jets, but it was solid. 3 apartment complexes in Hyde Park, a beautiful brownstone we called home, a sprawling lake house in Grand Haven, Michigan, and a retirement portfolio that ensured I would never have to rely on anyone for a dime. When Apollo passed away from a sudden heart attack 5 years ago, it felt like the foundation of my world had cracked. But I am a woman of faith and fortitude. I grieved, I prayed, and I kept moving forward. My anchor during that dark time was my only child, my son, Simon. Simon is a brilliant structural engineer. He inherited his father's mind for building things and my empathy. He was my pride and joy. But Simon had one fatal flaw. He saw the good in everyone, even when there was nothing but rot beneath the surface. Enter Chloe. Simon met Chloe Hastings at a charity gala downtown. She was a public relations executive, blonde, polished, with a smile that looked like it cost $10,000 and a laugh that never quite reached her eyes. From the moment she stepped into my brownstone, bringing a bottle of wine that she made sure to mention cost $200, my spirit didn't take to her. Apollo used to say I had a spiritual metal detector. I could spot a hustler a mile away. Chloe was a hustler, draped in cashmere. She asked too many questions about the square footage of my home, casually inquired about Apollo's life insurance, and always complained about how hard it was for her and Simon to build wealth in today's economy. Despite my reservations, Simon was blinded by love. They married 3 years ago in a lavish ceremony in Napa Valley, which, of course, I paid for, because Chloe's family was conveniently going through a transitional phase. As I got older, the arthritis in my hands worsened, and the stack of property tax forms, trust documents, and LLC renewals started to feel overwhelming. 6 months ago, Simon sat me down at my dining room table. Chloe was right beside him, her hand resting over his. "Mama, you shouldn't have to stress about this paperwork anymore," Simon had said gently. "Let me take over the day-to-day management of the accounts. We can set up a power of attorney just for the finances. You'll still have final say, but I'll do the heavy lifting." "Simon's right, Blair," Chloe chimed in, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "You should be relaxing at the lake house, reading your books, not fighting with the bank over routing numbers. We want to take care of you." I hesitated. I was sharp as a tack mentally, but the physical act of managing the estate was becoming a chore. I trusted my son implicitly. I didn't trust his wife, but Simon assured me that the legal access would be in his name only. So, against the quiet, nagging voice in my head, I went to my lawyer, Harrison Caldwell, a shark of a man who had been Apollo's best friend, and signed a limited financial power of attorney over to Simon. For a few months, everything seemed fine. My bills were paid on time, my property managers reported no issues, and the monthly stipends I sent to my sister in Atlanta went through without a hitch. Then came the Tuesday morning that shattered my reality. I had called Simon to ask a quick question about a plumbing invoice for the Hyde Park apartments. He answered while driving. I could hear the hum of his car's Bluetooth. Chloe was in the passenger seat. We spoke for about 5 minutes. Simon was sweet, promising to handle the invoice as soon as he got to his office. "Love you, Mama," he said. "I love you too, baby. Tell Chloe I said hello." "Will do." Bye. I pulled my phone away from my ear, fumbling with my arthritic thumb to hit the red end button, but a sudden cramp seized my hand, and I dropped the phone onto the plush rug by my armchair, bending down slowly to pick it up. I realized the line was still connected. Simon hadn't hung up either. He must have assumed I did and tossed his phone into the cup holder. I was about to speak, to tell him the call was still active, when I heard Chloe's voice echo from the speaker. It wasn't her usual high-pitched, syrupy tone. It was cold, calculating, and dripping with contempt. "Are you going to tell her about the Grand Haven property, or should I?" Chloe asked. "Chloe, drop it." Simon sighed, sounding exhausted. "I told you, we aren't selling the lake house. It's my dad's legacy. Mum loves that place. Your mum is 72 and barely leaves the city. We need the liquid capital for the new development project. You promised me we'd invest in my brother's startup. I said I would look at the numbers. Chloe, I didn't say I would liquidate my mother's assets to fund Raymond's pipe dream. I only have access to help her manage things." Then came the silence. A heavy, suffocating silence over the line. And then Chloe laughed. It was a dry, ugly sound. "Oh, Simon, you're so naive," she sneered. "He has no idea we already have access to everything. The trust, the equity lines, the offshore holding accounts your dad set up. All of it. What are you talking about?" Simon's voice spiked in panic. Before I hung up, I heard my son's wife say, "He has no idea we already have access to everything. I had my guy notarize an amended POA last month. I've already transferred the Hyde Park deeds to the new LLC. Your mother is living in a house she doesn't even own anymore, Simon. And by the time the old bat figures it out, she'll be in a nursing home, and we'll be in street barts." I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I finally pressed the red button, cutting off the sound of my son's rising shout. The silence in my living room was deafening. I sat in my armchair for 3 hours. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked away, marking the death of the life I thought I knew. My daughter-in-law had stolen my life's work. She had forged documents, bypassed my son, or perhaps he was in on it, though his shocked tone suggested otherwise, and effectively robbed a widow blind. She called me an old bat. She thought I was a fragile, clueless relic, waiting to be discarded. She had forgotten one crucial detail. I was Blair Parker. I survived the segregated South. I survived breast cancer while raising a toddler. I negotiated union contracts for the nurses of Chicago against men in $1,000 suits who thought they could intimidate me. Chloe Hastings was a mosquito, and I was about to become the windshield. I didn't call the police. I didn't call Simon. If I confronted them now, Chloe would cover her tracks, destroy evidence, or manipulate Simon into thinking I was suffering from dementia. No, I needed facts. I needed weapons. The next morning, I put on my best Street John knit suit, pinned Apollo's diamond brooch to my lapel, and had my driver take me downtown to the law offices of Caldwell, Vance, and Hughes. Harrison Caldwell was a man who looked like he chewed gravel for breakfast. When I walked into his corner office overlooking the Chicago River, he took one look at my face and told his secretary to hold all his calls for the rest of the day. "B," he said, pouring me a glass of water. "You look like you're about to read someone their last rites. What happened?" I told him everything. I repeated the conversation word for word. Harrison didn't interrupt. As I spoke, his face hardened, turning into a mask of pure, professional fury. "A forged POA," Harrison muttered, pacing behind his heavy mahogany desk. "To bypass the revocable living trust we set up, she would have needed a full, durable power of attorney with gifting powers, and she would have needed to forge your signature, my signature, as the drafter, and get a crooked notary to stamp it. She said she transferred the Hyde Park deeds to a new LLC. I said, my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly. Harrison immediately sat at his computer. For 20 minutes, the only sound was the furious clicking of his keyboard. Then he stopped. He let out a breath that sounded like a curse. "She wasn't lying, Bea," Harrison said grimly. turning his monitor so I could see. A week ago, quitclaim deeds were filed with the Cook County Assessor. The 3 apartment buildings were transferred from the Parker Family Trust to an entity called CH Holdings, LLC. Let me guess what CH stands for. Chloe Hastings, I whispered. Wait, it gets worse. Harrison continued, pulling up another screen. Because you signed that limited POA to Simon for management, I'm seeing massive equity lines of credit opened against your primary residence. $3.2 million. Bay. The funds were drawn down yesterday. My heart hammered against my ribs. Where did the money go? Wired to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. It's heavily shielded, but I can guarantee you Chloe has the routing numbers. Harrison looked at me, his eyes full of sorrow. B. Legally speaking, right now, you are practically bankrupt. If she defaults on those equity lines, the bank will foreclose on this house. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. What about Simon? Is he part of this? Harrison leaned back. From what you heard on the phone, Simon sounded genuinely shocked. Chloe likely used his legitimate access to get the account numbers, then used her forged, expanded POA to execute the heavy lifting. But Simon is legally entangled. As your fiduciary, his negligence allowed this. I want her destroyed, Harrison, I said softly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I want my assets back. I want her behind bars. And I want her to feel the exact moment her entire world collapses. A slow, predatory smile spread across Harrison's weathered face. That's the B. Parker I know. But to do this right, to make sure the DA has an airtight case for wire fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse, we need to gather evidence quietly. We need to freeze those assets before she moves them out of the Caymans. And most importantly, you cannot let Chloe know you suspect a thing. I can play the sweet, doddering mother-in-law, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. The strategy was set. Harrison would immediately file a quiet title action under seal and contact his friends at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I was to go home and invite Simon and Chloe over for Sunday dinner, as usual. Sunday arrived. The smell of my famous pot roast filled the house. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath, plastered a warm, fragile smile on my face, and opened the door. Simon looked terrible. He had dark circles under his eyes and a tense set to his jaw. Chloe, on the other hand, looked radiant. She was wearing a designer silk blouse that I knew, with sickening certainty, was paid for by the equity ripped from the walls of the home we were standing in. Blair! Chloe chirped, leaning in to air-kiss my cheeks. You look so tired. Are you feeling okay? You know, at your age, you really shouldn't be cooking big meals like this. Oh, I'm fine, sweetheart, I said, patting her arm. Her skin felt like a snake's. Just a little forgetful lately. My mind plays tricks on me. Simon, baby, are you all right? Simon hugged me tightly, burying his face in my shoulder. I'm fine, Mama. Just stressed at work. He couldn't look me in the eye. He knew something was wrong, even if he didn't know the full, devastating extent of it yet. He was hiding something to protect me, or so he thought. As we sat around the dining room table, I played my part to perfection. I asked a few times where my salt shaker was, even though it was right in front of me. I told a story about Apollo, lost my train of thought midway, and let out a confused little laugh. I watched Chloe across the table. Her eyes gleamed with a mix of pity and triumph. She was buying the act completely. You know, Simon, I said, taking a slow sip of my iced tea. I was looking for the deed to the Grand Haven house the other day. I just wanted to look at it, to remember when Apollo and I bought it, but I couldn't find it in the safe. Simon choked on his water. Chloe's smile froze for a microsecond before returning. Oh, Mama, Simon coughed. I moved all the important physical documents to a secure safety deposit box at Chase. Remember? We talked about it. He was lying. I had never agreed to that. Chloe had clearly fed him a script to cover the missing paperwork. Did we? I touched my temple, feigning distress. Oh, my memory really is going. Thank goodness I have you two to handle these things. I'd be lost without you. Don't worry about a thing, Blair, Chloe said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. We have everything under control. I know you do, Chloe. I smiled back, looking deep into her cold, greedy eyes. I know exactly what you're capable of. The trap was set, and the fox was comfortably seated at my table, completely unaware that the henhouse was lined with dynamite. The Monday after that Sunday dinner, I didn't waste a second. While Simon was at his engineering firm and Chloe was supposedly working at her PR agency, I was sitting in a sterile, windowless conference room at the Everett McKinley Dirksen United States Courthouse. Harrison had called in a massive favor. Sitting across from us was Supervisory Special Agent Gregory Miller of the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. Agent Miller was a tall, no-nonsense man from Detroit with a receding hairline and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. Mrs. Parker, Agent Miller said, opening a thick manila folder. Harrison gave me the preliminary wire transfer data. I've spent the last 48 hours digging into CH, Holdings, LLC, and the offshore routing numbers. Your daughter-in-law is sloppy, but she's fast. How sloppy? I asked, gripping my coffee cup. She used a guy named Terence Rollins for the notary stamp on the forged power of attorney, Miller explained, sliding a mugshot across the table. It was a young, sharp-featured man who looked like he'd sell his own grandmother for a pair of designer sneakers. Terry is a known entity to local law enforcement. Forgery, low-level real estate scams. We brought him in yesterday on an unrelated parole violation. It took exactly 10 minutes of threatening him with federal wire fraud charges before he flipped on Chloe. Did he give you the evidence? Harrison asked, leaning forward. Better. Miller smiled grimly. He recorded her. Terry isn't stupid. He knew he was playing with fire by forging documents for an estate worth north of $10 million. On the audio, Chloe explicitly tells him she's draining your equity lines to fund an offshore account before putting you in a memory care facility. My stomach churned. Hearing the confirmation out loud that she was actively planning to lock me away in a facility while she spent Apollo's hard-earned money was a different kind of pain. But pain is just fuel if you know how to burn it. What about my son? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Is Simon involved? Agent Miller's expression softened slightly. We subpoenaed Simon's private emails and text messages with Chloe. Mrs. Parker, I'm going to be straight with you. Your son is a victim of a textbook gaslighting campaign. For the last 6 months, Chloe has been sending him articles on early-onset Alzheimer's. She's been documenting your lapses in memory, which she clearly fabricated, and convinced him that if he didn't secure the physical documents, you might sign them away to a scammer. I closed my eyes. The missing deed, to the Grand Haven house, Simon hadn't stolen it. He had hidden it because his wife convinced him his mother was losing her mind. He was foolish, blindly trusting, and dangerously naive. But he wasn't a thief. So, we have her on the forgery and the intent, Harrison deduced. Can we freeze the Cayman accounts? Not yet, Miller cautioned. The money is bouncing through shell companies. If we spook her now, she presses a button, and those funds scatter into crypto wallets we will never trace. We need to catch her executing a domestic transfer in real time, or we need a confession of the full scope of her network to ensure we recover every dime. How do we do that? I asked. Agent Miller looked at me, his eyes dead serious. She wants everything, Mrs. Parker. Right now, the only asset she hasn't touched is the Grand Haven Lake House, because it's legally protected under a separate trust clause that even her forged POA couldn't easily crack without your physical presence and a new signature. So, I said, the plan forming in my mind like a steel trap snapping shut. We give her the lake house. For the next 3 weeks, I put on the performance of a lifetime. I stopped wearing makeup. I purposefully wore mismatched socks. I called Simon twice in the middle of the night, pretending I thought it was 1998, and asking when his father was getting home from the plumbing supply warehouse. It broke my heart to hear the panic and sorrow in my son's voice, but the stakes were too high. I had to sell the narrative that Blair Parker was rapidly declining. Chloe, predictably, went in for the kill. She started coming over to the brownstone unannounced during the day. I installed hidden cameras in the living room and my home office, courtesy of Agent Miller's team. I watched the live feed from my iPad hidden in the kitchen cabinet as Chloe rifled through my desk drawers, snapping photos of my tax returns and old bank statements. She even had the audacity to drink my good bourbon while doing it. One Tuesday, she sat me down on the sofa, her voice dripping with that fake, saccharine concern. "Blair, honey," she cooed, stroking my hair. I had to force myself not to flinch. "Simon and I are just so worried about you. You're not safe in this big house all by yourself anymore. I just get a little confused." "Chloe," I stammered, making my hands shake. "Where is Apollo? He was supposed to fix the radiator." Chloe's eyes flashed with predatory delight. "Apollo is gone, Blair. Remember, it's just you. And the taxes on this house, the upkeep of the lake house. It's draining your accounts. You're almost out of money." The audacity. She had stolen $3.2 million, and now she was trying to convince me I was broke. "Out of money," I gasped, clutching my chest. "But the apartments?" "The market crashed, Blair. We had to sell them at a loss to cover your medical bills," she lied smoothly, not missing a beat. "But don't worry. I found a beautiful assisted living community in Scottsdale, Arizona. Sunshine, round-the-clock nurses. But to afford it, we need to sell the Grand Haven house." "Sell Grand Haven?" I whispered, letting a single tear fall down my cheek. "But I love the lake." "I have a buyer," Chloe pressed, leaning in close. "A private investor who will pay cash, above market value. All you have to do is sign the transfer deed. It will save you, Blair. Let me save you." I looked at her, channeling every ounce of fear and confusion a 72-year-old widow could muster. "Okay, Chloe," I said weakly. The trap was set for Friday afternoon. Chloe told Simon she was taking the afternoon off to help Blair with some spring cleaning. In reality, she was bringing the buyer to my brownstone to execute the sale of the Grand Haven property. What Chloe didn't know was that the private investor, a man named Richard Sterling, was actually undercover agent Rick Santoro from the FBI's Chicago field office. And the title agent accompanying him was Harrison's senior paralegal, secretly wired for sound. At 1 p.m., an unmarked black van parked down the street from my house. Inside, Agent Miller and his technical team were monitoring the audio and video feeds. At 1:30 middags, the doorbell rang. I shuffled to the door in a faded housecoat, leaning heavily on a cane I didn't actually need. Chloe breezed in, smelling of expensive perfume and victory. Behind her was Agent Santoro, playing the part of a wealthy, impatient real estate developer to perfection. "Blair, this is Richard," Chloe announced loudly, speaking to me as if I were deaf. "He's the man buying the lake house. We just need to do some quick paperwork, and then you can go back to resting." "Hello, ma'am," Santoro said, giving me a polite, professional nod. He placed a thick stack of documents on my dining room table. "Is Simon coming?" I asked, looking around vaguely. "Simon is at work, sweetie. He's so busy, but he knows all about this," Chloe lied. She pulled out a chair for me. "Sit down, Blair. Let's get this over with." I sat. I looked at the papers. They were a complete transfer of the deed, bypassing the trust entirely, directing the cash funds directly into C.H. Holdings LLC. It was the smoking gun. "Chloe," I said, my voice trembling. If I sign this, where will the money go? Will it go to my checking account at Chase? Chloe sighed, an exasperated sound. No, Blair, we talked about this. It goes into the family LLC to pay for your facility in Arizona. The routing numbers are already in the contract. Mr. Sterling will wire the 2.5 million directly into the offshore, the corporate holding account today. Got her. Offshore? I asked innocently. Like the Cayman Islands? Apollo never liked foreign banks. Chloe's eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second, a flicker of panic crossing her face. But her greed overrode her caution. It's standard tax procedure, Blair. Just sign on the dotted line. Right here. She thrust a Mont Blanc pen into my hand. I held the pen, letting it hover over the signature line. The house was dead silent, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock. I don't know, I hesitated. Maybe I should call Simon. Simon is in a meeting. Chloe snapped, her mask slipping. The sugary sweetness evaporated, replaced by the cold, calculating voice I had heard on the phone weeks ago. Blair, you are broke. You are losing your mind. If you don't sign this, the state is going to step in, take everything, and put you in a county ward. Do you want to die in a county ward? That's quite a hard sell, Mrs. Hastings Parker, Agent Santoro noted smoothly, breaking his character just enough to let the tension spike. I need to be sure the seller is of sound mind and acting under her own volition. She's fine, Chloe hissed at him. Just get the wire transfer ready on your tablet. She's signing it right now. Chloe grabbed my wrist, trying to force my hand down toward the paper. Suddenly, the heavy oak front door of the brownstone flew open. Get your hands off my mother. It was Simon. He stood in the entryway, chest heaving, his face pale and contorted with a mixture of rage and absolute heartbreak. Behind him stood Harrison Caldwell, looking as immovable as a mountain. Chloe dropped my wrist as if she'd been burned. Simon, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be at the site inspection, Harrison called me. Simon stepped into the dining room, his eyes fixed on the documents on the table, then on his wife. He told me to come home immediately. He told me to listen to a recording. Simon pulled his phone from his pocket. He tapped the screen, and the unmistakable voice of Terence Rollins filled the room, detailing exactly how Chloe had paid him to forge my signature, to steal the apartment buildings. Chloe turned the color of ash. She looked from Simon to the buyer sitting at the table, and finally, to me. I didn't look confused anymore. I sat up straight, placed the pen down on the table, and smoothed the front of my housecoat. My hands weren't shaking. Hello, Chloe, I said, my voice clear, steady, and sharp as a scalpel. I believe the phrase you used was, old bat? Let's see how well this old bat can swing. The silence in my dining room shattered into a million jagged pieces. Chloe physically recoiled from the table, her manicured hands flying to her chest. She looked like a cornered animal, darting her eyes toward the front door, then toward the kitchen, as if plotting a physical escape. Simon, honey, Chloe stammered, her voice pitching up into a desperate, breathy register. What is this? This is a misunderstanding. Your mother is confused. Stop, Simon choked out. He didn't yell. The sheer volume of his heartbreak was held in that single, quiet word. He walked slowly toward the table, his eyes locked on the forged deed sitting next to the Mont Blanc pen. I heard the tapes. Chloe, Harrison played them for me in the car. I heard you pay a paroled felon to forge my mother's signature. I heard you laugh about putting her in a home. Chloe's mask of denial cracked, revealing the raw, ugly desperation underneath. I did it for us, Simon. Your mother is sitting on an empire she doesn't even use. We needed the capital. Raymond's startup was going to triple our investment. Raymond's startup is a shell company, Mrs. Hastings Parker, Agent Santoro interrupted. The fake real estate developer smoothly stood up, reaching into his tailored suit jacket. He didn't pull out a checkbook. He pulled out a gold badge. Special Agent Rick Santoro, Federal Bureau of Investigation. And you are under arrest. Right on cue, the front door swung open wider, and Agent Gregory Miller strode in, followed by two uniformed Chicago police officers. "Chloe Hastings!" Agent Miller barked, his voice echoing off the hardwood floors. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, and interstate forgery. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." For a moment, Chloe actually tried to run. She lunged toward the hallway, but she was in 4-inch Louboutins, and Agent Miller had spent 20 years chasing down actual hardened criminals. He caught her by the arm, spinning her around and smoothly clicking the steel handcuffs around her wrists. "Get your hands off me!" she shrieked, all pretense of elegance gone. Her perfectly styled blonde hair fell into her face. "Simon! Do something! Tell them to stop!" Simon stood frozen, tears streaming down his face, completely ignoring her. He was staring at me. I stood up from the table, letting my cane drop to the floor with a loud clatter. I didn't need it. I never needed it. I walked over to where Chloe was being held by the officers. I looked her dead in the eyes. "You underestimated the wrong woman," I said softly, making sure she heard every syllable. "You looked at my grey hair and saw a victim. You looked at my kindness and saw weakness. But my husband and I built this life from the dirt up, and I will be damned before I let a cheap hustler in designer clothes steal my legacy." "You old witch," Chloe spat, her face twisted in pure hatred. "Take her out of my house," I told Agent Miller, turning my back on her. As they dragged Chloe out the front door, her screams echoing down the quiet, tree-lined street of my Hyde Park neighborhood, the adrenaline that had kept me going for the last 3 weeks finally crashed. I sank onto the living room sofa, taking a deep, shuddering breath. Harrison walked over and poured me a glass of my own good bourbon, handing it to me with a look of profound respect. "You did it, B. You got her." "Did we get the money, Harrison?" I asked, taking a sip. The amber liquid burned going down, but it settled my nerves. Agent Santoro nodded as he packed up the fake deed. Because she attempted to execute a fraudulent transfer across state lines with an undercover federal agent, we had the immediate probable cause needed to execute the freezing orders. My team contacted the Cayman authorities 10 minutes ago. Every red cent of that $3.2 million is locked down. It will take some legal untangling, but it's coming back to you. And the apartments? The forged deeds are being contested in court tomorrow morning, Harrison assured me. With Rollins' confession and Chloe's arrest, the judge will void the transfer. The LLC will be dissolved. It will be like she never touched them. I closed my eyes, a profound sense of relief washing over me. But when I opened them, I saw the true casualty of this war standing in the corner of my living room. Simon was weeping silently, his shoulders shaking. He looked like a little boy who had just watched his whole world burn down. I set my glass down and walked over to my son. I wrapped my arms around his broad shoulders, pulling him down into an embrace. He buried his face in my neck, sobbing, repeatedly apologizing. "I'm so sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry," he cried. "I thought she loved me. I thought she was trying to help you. I was so stupid. I gave her the account numbers. I almost lost everything Dad built. I almost lost you." "Hush now, Simon," I whispered, stroking his hair just like I did when he was a child. "You didn't do this. A predator found you, and she used your good heart against you. That is her sin, not yours. How can you ever trust me again?" he asked, pulling back, his eyes bloodshot and full of shame. I looked at him, balancing my fierce love for him with the cold, hard reality of what had transpired. "I will always love you, Simon. You are my son." "But your father used to say, trust is a building, and it takes a lot longer to build it than it does to tear it down. You're going to have to rebuild it. Starting tomorrow, the power of attorney is revoked. I'm hiring a professional fiduciary firm to manage the day-to-day alongside Harrison. You need to focus on healing, on your career, and on learning how to see the snakes hiding in the grass. Simon nodded, wiping his face. He understood. It was the hardest lesson he would ever have to learn. But he was alive. He was free. And he was still my boy. Over the next year, the justice system ground Chloe Hastings into dust. Her brother Raymond was also arrested. It turned out his startup was just a Ponzi scheme they were running together, using stolen funds from wealthy, unsuspecting marks. Because of the overwhelming evidence, Chloe took a plea deal to avoid a 20-year sentence. She got 8 years in a federal penitentiary in West Virginia. I didn't go to her sentencing. I had better things to do. Last week, I sat on the back deck of my Grand Haven lake house. The sun was setting over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of purple and gold. Simon was down by the water, skipping stones, looking lighter and more at peace than he had in years. He's dating a lovely woman now, a middle school teacher named Sarah, who doesn't care about square footage or equity lines. I sipped my iced tea. The real deed to the house safely locked in a vault that only I had the combination to. I am Blair Parker, and my foundation remains unshaken. I rebuilt my estate, forgave my son, and watched the woman who tried to bury me get locked in a federal cage. Greed is a blinding poison, but truth is a floodlight. They thought I was an old, weak woman ready to fade away. But I am the architect of my own life, and I hold the master keys.